since a new domestic abuse law came into force, which makes controlling behaviour a criminal offence. Coercive behaviour, that's what we're talking about this morning. But new figures suggest the law isn't being widely applied. A Freedom of Information request by the Bureau for Investigative Journalism suggests only around 500 charges have been brought under the new laws in the 29 police force areas that responded to the request. Now, 6 police forces have charged fewer than 5 people with this offence. That's not many, especially when you consider that almost 2 million cases of domestic abuse are recorded each year. Well, Five Lives Rowan Bridge has been looking into this. Hi, Rowan.
Hi.
Explain, first of all, what coercive and controlling behaviour is, what we mean by it as an offence.
Yeah, I mean, the police describe it as behaviour that stops someone from being in control of their own life. And it is a pattern of behaviour. And it doesn't have to be physical threats. It can be psychological control. So it's things like telling a person who they can or can't see, maybe isolating them from their family, telling them that they shouldn't see family members, stopping them from having outside interests or certain friends. But it can be an insidious process. It's not a one-off event. It can ramp up over time. So it can start off with someone saying, oh, I'll look after your finances for you. But then over time what happens is they start to control that money and what the person can spend it on. Or it can be, oh, I've bought you some clothes, I'd really like you to wear them. But over time that becomes, I'm telling you what to wear. So it's the way that this thing is not just a one-off event, it's the way that it can build up over time in a kind of insidious way and start to control that person.
Have we got a clear idea? Have we got any kind of figures as to how commonplace this kind of offence is?
Yeah, it's really difficult to know for sure what the true scale of this sort of problem is. So the most accurate barometer that is taken for crime at the moment is what's known as the Crime Survey for England and Wales. And what they do is they go out and interview a representative sample of the British public about their experiences of crime. And so what it will pick up is offences that haven't necessarily been reported to the police. If you look at the Crime Survey for England and Wales, the estimate is it's something like 1.9 million adults are victims of domestic abuse last year. But that includes coercive control within those figures, but it doesn't break it out. Though the Crime Survey is going to start doing that from next year, so we will hopefully then get a better picture of how commonplace this particular offence is.
And clearly, Rowan, we've talked about this enough times to know that this is the kind of thing that can affect pretty much anyone.
It really cuts across all social groups from talking to the police. There is no typical victim. It could be a doctor, a GP, it could be a person working at a supermarket checkout. There really is no specific sort of victim of this sort of thing. Detective Superintendent Denise Worth is the force lead for domestic abuse at Greater Manchester Police, and she says the way that coercive control was featured as a storyline in, for example, the Radio 4 soap The Archers was crucial because it was able to get the message out to people who might otherwise not realise they could be affected by this sort of problem.
This is, you know, sort of middle-class background, people who may not think that this happens in that community, in, you know, whether it be a farming community or whatever, but it does. And actually having those programmes reaches every victim that is possible. And I think that's really, really important. And I think it's important to try and make sure that everybody understands what help is out there and what actual domestic abuse looks like, feels like, so that they can realise that they may be a victim.
So it's 2 years then, Rowan, 2 years since it became a specific offence. How effectively are the police dealing with it as a specific offence?
It is a very difficult area to start bringing prosecutions because of the kind of complexities of the situation you're dealing with. There are people who are being abused, and that is what is going on here. This is abuse, who may not see it like that, or they may still have feelings for the person who is controlling them, or they may feel trapped. It's difficult for them to escape that sort of situation or feel that they can go to the police. If you look at the data, you can see how far there is to go with all of this stuff. So these are figures for a year rather than the 2 years that you're talking about. But this is based on 38 forces in the year up to March 2017. So that's most police forces in England and Wales. Now, there were 4,246 offences recorded by the police. But in that year, only 309 cases where a prosecution started. You know, as you said in that figures that you got before, that is an increase on the previous year because you're talking 500 plus over 2 years. But even so, Detective Superintendent Denise Worth of Greater Manchester Police says they're striving to be better, but it's a complicated issue.
So it might be that the victim doesn't assist and we haven't got evidence to actually take it to prosecution, so without their support we can't do it. So extra evidence would be we might rely on body worn video, we might rely on friends' statements, we might rely on a 999 call. If we haven't got any of that and the victim refuses to support us, then we can't take it any further. It might be that there are evidential difficulties. You know, the statement might be difficult, that we can't corroborate, and we can't corroborate what the perpetrator's saying. So they're usually around either somebody doesn't want to take it forward or we've got evidential difficulties. So actually the outcomes might not get to a court, but what they will get is some support from our partner agencies, charities, and be able to help them, you know, in whatever's going on with their issues.
OK, Rowan, thank you. That's our reporter, Rowan Bridge. Just had this text from an anonymous listener in Nottingham saying, coercive control is an abuse which many don't understand. My husband suffered it for many, many years in his previous relationship, and we are still in therapy 2 years on after he acknowledged the abuse to himself. She is still trying to control his life, even 5 years after their breakup, and he's been unable to see his children all this time. She even tried to turn his own father and mother against him. It's such a complex and hidden abuse, says this listener. Your thoughts very, very welcome, particularly if this is something you've experienced, on 85058. Let's have a word with Lisa Marie Flavin, who experienced coercive control at the hands of her ex-partner. Good morning, Lisa Marie.
Morning, Chris.
Morning. Thanks for joining us. Was this from the start of the relationship? When did it start?
I mean, everything Rowan's just said, it's just everything that's being said is ringing so true to me. Coercive control doesn't happen overnight. It's a very slow trickle of a process. You know, maybe there were early warning signs that you might mistake for, oh, they care, or they're jealous, or oh, it's just because they care.
What kind of thing?
Oh, I don't know. So, you know, it started off, for example, it became difficult to see friends. First of all, it would be like, oh, you know, stay with me, you know, let's spend some time together. And that then escalated into, you know, don't go, you don't need friends, you've got me. You know, it's all a very slow process. It is very complicated, coercive control.
And if you had turned around and said, well, no, I haven't seen my friends for ages, thanks, and they're all meeting up, what would have happened in that kind of scenario?
I mean, I did, first of all, I just carried on as normal, went to see my friends, you know, but from the minute I left, he would be texting me, ringing me. If he couldn't get hold of me, he would find my friends on Facebook and message them to check I was where I was saying I was going. And it just became so difficult. It wears you down. It became so difficult to go out and see friends that you just think, oh, it's easier not to in the end.
Yeah. And so how were you viewing your relationship at that time? I mean, could you see what was slowly happening, or was it so incremental in a way that it suddenly came upon you?
You don't see it. It sounds ridiculous. You know, there's a lot of people listening who will relate to what I'm saying. There's a lot of people listening who would think, how does that happen? It's a very slow process. You don't realise it's happening to you. You know, I realised I was depressed long before I realised I was being abused. And it just escalates, you know. Then he would destroy my mobile phones. He'd rip my phone out of the socket, throw my phone in the bath. You know, he would turn on a knife edge, you know, fly into unprovoked rage. Social media became impossible. Everyone who, you know, contact me on social media, I was questioned, who are they? Why are they messaging you? I would get thrown out of my house in the end. You know, I remember he would wake me up in the middle of the night and just start accusing me of things, emptying my drawers, packing up my things into black bags. You know, it just escalated.
And what were you thinking then? I mean, with those kind of things, were you thinking, I need to get out of this?
I mean, the friends and the things at the beginning, you kind of think they overreacting, and then they apologise. Oh, I'm not a monster, you know. Let's try again. And you know, you just think, oh, you know, they convince you that you think, oh, I know the real them. They're not really a bad person. You know, don't forget, you love these people as well. You know, when it's just you and the other person in a relationship, and the outside world is not involved, you're not allowed to speak to anyone. Don't tell anyone our business. It becomes the norm.
Yeah, well, that's a sad fact, isn't it? And you hear that repeatedly, that really shockingly abusive behaviour can become the norm. I mean, what about your friends and family at this stage? Did they notice any of this going on?
I mean, I know now that they did. At the time, I tried to hide it. You know, my ex-partner used to say, don't tell anyone our business. You know, be loyal to them. My friends did point out things like, oh, this is not right, you know, he shouldn't be contacting you all the time, he should leave it alone. But I was deeply under his spell then. It was my colleagues in work who noticed the most, because obviously I'm in work 5 days a week, and these are the people who noticed the incredible demise of my mental health, going from this bubbly social person that I normally am to a shadow of my former self. I could barely talk, smile. You know, he involved my place of work. He would call me in work. He would call me on my work line. He would turn up at work. So, you know, they noticed it a lot more than other people, I think, when I tried to hide it. You can't hide things like that.
And so that's great that they were willing to say to you, look, what's going on here, were they?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's all about the bystander effect. We all need to be aware, you know, you think somebody might be depressed or, you know, something might be going on at home. This is what it could be, you know. Like I said, I didn't realise I was being abused. And when I found out about coercive control, I was like, wow, there's a name for what's happening to me. There's a name. This is a thing.
Oh, really? So you became aware that this was a thing whilst it was happening to you?
Sort of while I was trying to escape. You know, like I said, my colleagues were so supportive, and then I opened up and I felt I was able to talk, and then you talk to other people and you realise this is it's like a disease. It's a common thing of domestic abuse, coercive control. It's the foundation to every other type of abuse. It really is.
Now, were you taking notes, Lisa Marie, as to what was happening to you? Because that's often suggested if you get that wherewithal, if you get that understanding of what's happening to you, then take some notes, try and build up some evidence as it's happening. Did you do that?
Well, to be honest, I didn't intentionally gather evidence. I was so afraid he was going to seriously hurt me that I kept things, you know, I thought if something happens to me, at least there's this left behind and people will know what happened. So I kept the threatening voicemails. I kept the emails, the voicemails. You know, he used to tell me, you know, one day I'm going to snap and nobody's going to be able to stop me. And when you see that look in someone's eye, quite often, you believe that. So it wasn't an intentional gathering of evidence. It was more, if something happens to me, then this is on my phone. I've got this. People will know what happened to me.
Yes.
That's how frightening it is.
Yeah, right. Okay. And when did the police actually become involved then, Lisa Marie?
When the perpetrator contacted my place of work, I work for a substance misuse charity. He actually contacted my employer and falsely accused me of being a drug user. He said I'd smashed up our house. And luckily my employers had the background knowledge of what had happened, you know, and they were the ones who said, it's time to go to the police. You know, and I went to the police. My boss took me, and it was just, wow, it really hit me like a ton of bricks. You know, sat there in a police station telling an officer all these things, you know, build-up of all these many things that had happened to me. It was like, wow. And that was the start. But they didn't pick up the coercive control.
Let me say, first of all, though, that it sounds like you've got great employers. Sounds like you've got great workmates, right?
I have, yeah. I'm really lucky.
Yeah, it sounds that way. And so what then happens? What was he charged with, your former partner? If it wasn't the coercive behaviour, how did that work?
So when I first went to the police, they picked up on harassment. They saw it as harassment, you know, the constant call in my work, the times I tried to escape, he would coerce me back, you know, with, you know, I'm not a monster, let me prove it, you know, you owe me money, I'll come and see me and I'll give you your money, and, you know, and you're still, like I said, you've still got feelings for this person. It's a complicated cycle. The police picked up on the harassment, and it was many, many, many months before I had to go to them and point out that this actually was coercive control. And it's only because I had friends who were familiar with the legislation in another police force that I even was aware of coercive control.
Why do you think they didn't have the wherewithal to go with that at the start?
I think because this legislation, as we know, is 2 years today, and officers have not been trained on it, or they've had very simple training, you know, tick the boxes, online training, when in actual fact this is complicated, you know, and the training, they haven't had the training, and it's the old school, let's go down the harassment route.
Yes.
But when I read the legislation, you know, the CPS legislation, I was, wow, this is me, this is everything that's happening to me.
Yes. So, I mean, was that sort of understandable to a degree that they just sort of settled to what they knew, or was that really disappointing that they weren't necessarily up to speed with the kind of conviction that you were hoping they would be pursuing?
I mean, at the time, obviously, when I went to the police, I didn't know anything about the law, so that's what I thought they could do, the only thing I thought they could do. But then when it came to me having to go back to the police with a printout of the legislation, you know, and sort of they were like, oh, no, you know, trying to brush under the carpet, and I was really like, no, this is exactly what's happened to me, I had all the evidence. Then, yeah, it's frustrating, yeah, it's disappointing. And you think, what about other victims who are unaware unaware they're being abused, unaware coercive control is a law, it's illegal, and sort of don't have the motivation and don't have the strength to go forward, you know, to go to the police and say, that this is what's happening to me.
The police have since apologised, haven't they? What did they say to you?
The CPS have apologised, the Crown Prosecution Service.
Right.
I've never sort of had an apology off the police, but I don't blame the police force because they didn't have the training. But then, you know, it did go get to court. There was a charge for coercive control, but then it's the CPS who chose to go with a lesser charge, like a plea bargain.
Yeah. But he was convicted in the end, was he?
He was. So basically, he was charged with harassment and coercive controlling behaviour. I had a catalogue of evidence. The CPS then asked me how would I feel if they accepted a guilty plea of harassment and not pursue the coercive control, to which I, you know, strongly made my feelings known. I wanted to go ahead with the coercive control. This is two different counts. It's two different types. I mean, harassment is part of coercive control. Gwent Police, this is the first person they've ever charged with coercive control. This could have been a landmark case for domestic abuse. They disregarded what I wanted to do, and they accepted the harassment guilty plea and didn't pursue coercive control. So I've since had an apology from the CPS saying there was enough evidence, it should have been brought towards the jury, you know, this should have gone ahead.
But it doesn't sound like your experience is totally uncommon, does it? Because, I mean, these latest figures that we're talking about suggesting only 1 in 6 arrests for coercive control are leading to a charge. Do you understand the reasons, perhaps, why that might be, as we heard in that report from Rowan, that sometimes the evidence is particularly, it's a complex path to secure some kind of conviction and even to pursue that charge?
I do understand because, you know, I was lucky that I had the evidence. I kept the voicemails. I kept the threatening messages. I had eyewitness testimonies from my colleagues and my friends and things like that. I do understand it's difficult to prove. However, the people on the ground, the police, the officers, the people first dealing with this need to be more aware of coercive control, that this is a thing, this is complex. So I do understand it can be difficult to prove. But when the evidence is there, like in my case, and they still won't bring it towards the jury, they're accepting a lesser, you know, a guilty plea to a lesser charge, that's total misunderstanding. That's total lack of regard for the law that's here to protect us.
Now, I understand you're doing your bit to try and improve the situation, aren't you, Lisa Marie? You've been doing some work with the police to help improve their systems, their training in this area.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I've been doing, I'm trying to turn this negative into a positive, so I'm making noise whenever I can, you know, public speaking, and currently I'm helping my local police force, Gwent Police. They are rolling out coercive controlling behaviour legislation to all officers as of January. They've got an interactive training that they'll be doing, and I've sort of spoken via video about my experience, about things they missed, you know, what could have been done, mistakes that were made. So, you know, and this needs to be happening all over the country.
But they're broadly receptive, are they? It's stuff that they want to hear about.
I mean, yes. I don't know if this has come from the errors made in my case, or, I mean, this should be done, you know, when the legislation came out 2 years ago. Yeah. There's been so many missed opportunities. But yeah, I mean, this is happening now with Gwent Police, but it should be happening nationally.
And your abuser is presumably out and about now. I mean, how does that feel in your mind, knowing that person who caused you so much misery is out there? I
mean, it's frightening because I found out on the day of sentencing he had a previous conviction for ABH, smashing a glass in an ex-girlfriend's face. So, you know, it's gone a step further there, and he's out, he's free, he's doing it to someone else. Society is going on accepting this behaviour.
You sure? Yeah. You think so? Yeah. No. How is your life now? How is, you know, how do you move on for something like that? You know, particularly in respect of new relationships and such like.
Yeah, I mean, it was very difficult to move on, especially while the case was still going on. You know, someone's out there free doing it to someone else. Like I said, I'm doing lots of volunteering with Welsh Women's Aid, helping other women. That's my healing. That's my justice. It's difficult to trust in the world like you once did. But as time has gone on, you realise not everybody's like that. That's the first person I've come across in my whole 36 years,
Yeah.
It's a slow process, but you can heal from it. You can recover, It's a big, wide world out there. That one person who controlled you, and they don't define you.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you went through such a difficult time, Lisa Marie, but I'm glad that you're doing what you can to turn it into a positive for yourself and for everybody else. And we really appreciate you speaking to us.
Yeah, we just need to keep raising awareness. Speaking from a woman's point of view, this could happen to our daughters, our mothers, our sisters, our friends. Like Rowan said, this knows no class, no age, no status, religion. Abuse can happen to anyone.
Exactly right. Lisa Marie, thank you very much indeed. It's really nice to speak to you, and Happy New Year to you as well. There she is, Lisa Marie. I'm sure she probably